Thank you for joining me today. I wanted to do this in January because we're about to enter the busiest time of the year for many accountants, and not just those in public accounting, but in business and industry as well. And in fact, I lost internet earlier today, and so this is a busy time for me, except I'm scrambling because I have no Wi-Fi. I've been stressed all day. I've been practicing some of these techniques, and so I'm excited to share them with you. The timing couldn't be more perfect. I do have experience in public accounting, though. I lived public accounting for 23 busy seasons. 17 of those busy seasons were in my own firm. And what I learned is that after I sold my practice, the impact of stress in busy seasons, it carries over the entire year. And it's not just on me, but my family. For me as a wife and a mother, as a sister and a friend, stress became so ever present. I didn't even notice it then the way I do now. But before we jump in, let me introduce myself. I went a little ahead of myself here. My name is Jana Etienne. I am a certified diversity executive, and I'm a CPA with those plenty of experience in public accounting. Today, I'm a certified diversity executive, and my work is centered on something I call fearless inclusion. And I define that as the freedom to be yourself and the ability to create space for others to do the same. And I help organizations reimagine their culture where people can navigate confidently, vulnerably, and openly. And this has directly tied, in fact, to today's conversation, because creating these spaces where we can just show up the way we are naturally, it means we can be brave and vulnerable and open when we're under stress, when we're feeling overwhelmed. And so that's really what I want to talk about today. So our discussion is organized in 3 buckets. I'm going to spend the first half going over the first 2 buckets. And then I really want to give a little bit of extra time to the how, so that you walk away with some techniques that you can practice, or a suggestion of different techniques you might try, so that you have them ready for you if and when you need them during tax season or busy season, or any stressful period that you're coming up against if you don't deal with tax season. And in fact, I use the word if. Let's change that, because it's not a question of if you'll be stressed. It's just a question of when. Sometimes it can be very acute. So finding that technique can help you prepare for those events. When they come, you'll be able to navigate through them with some comfort. Now, before I jump in, I want to get a sense of where you all work. So we're going to start with our first poll. Where is your primary work location? I really wanted to ask this question because I was interested to see how the mix of schedules and workplaces show up today in our audience. I think that this will influence our stress, because each of these locations present their own challenges. So for example, if you work in an office, it could be limited privacy, it could be difficulty focusing because it's such a busy environment. If you work from home, maybe it's difficulty setting boundaries. If it's hybrid, maybe it can be unsettling because you're bouncing back and forth between different routines, styles, or environments. And then if you are completely remote, and I differentiate that from you work from home, but you're local to the office, that can change what it, quote unquote, feels like to work in this organization. So I don't know, when the results are up there, Autumn, throw them out.
Yeah, we are almost have everyone in. I'll let you know that it is a tie right now with 27% between in the office and hybrid, followed by 23% with remote work from home, 19% work from home local, and 4% prefer not to answer.
So 27% are in the office or hybrid, which is roughly half. Okay, CPAs do not do spontaneous math, so I apologize, but I'm going to go with 50% are in the office or hybrid, which means you're navigating or bouncing around between different environments, which can create a different form of stress than, say, if you're remote. And my practice is entirely remote, and those boundaries can be very stressful when I'm not respecting the ones that I set. All right, let's look at the definitions. I always like to start with definitions as I work through topics. And the first one is stress. Now, depending on where you look up a definition, you're going to see it defined in different ways. So, for example, Merriam-Webster defines it as a state resulting from bodily or mental tension, resulting from factors that tend to alter an existent equilibrium, which I thought was really interesting. The American Psychological Association describes stress as a feeling of being overwhelmed, burdened, or exhausted from challenges. And I recently saw a definition that resonated. Mental pressure or worry resulting from adverse or very demanding circumstances. All of these resonate in different ways, and at the end of the day, it comes down to what you see here. It's worry or tension because you're going through a difficult situation or you're reacting to a difficult event. It's a natural thing, and it's not just physical, but it can be mental and emotional. And there's this intersection that we shrug off that it's just physical, or it's just the way things are, or I hide the mental effects because of stigma or negative stereotypes. But as we'll talk about today, this intense, persistent, or chronic stress is tied to the body. It isn't just the mind. That's why this discussion is so important. Now, I included anxiety here because they feel very similar. And we're going to talk about, how they can feel similar, but first, let's differentiate it. So anxiety, this is closely related to stress. I found a definition that I thought was really interesting, and that is worrying about something that hasn't happened yet. That's really bottom lining it here. It's this feeling nervous or a sense of unease about something with an uncertain outcome that hasn't or may never even happen. And anxiety can sometimes be the response to stress, this fear or apprehension of what's about to come. So let's compare and contrast them. They're often used interchangeably, but they're distinctly different concepts when they think of it in terms of psychology or mental health. And that's because they have many key symptoms in common, but there are some differences. Stress is in response to an external cause, like a tight deadline or a challenging family situation. So it's typically tied to a specific event, and then it tends to subside after the situation resolves itself. And so it can be characterized as a sense of pressure or urgency, and it's, again, tied to a known source. Anxiety, on the other hand, it can be more vague and undefined. It's this persistent feeling of apprehension or dread, and it might not be tied to a specific event or challenge. And so it can manifest as worry or nervousness or fear that is out of proportion, or should I disproportionate? What's the right word? To what you're actually facing. Another way to look at it, stress is physiological and behavioral responses to an immediate threat or a challenge, whereas anxiety is an emotional feeling or psychological state, anticipating the possibility of harm. And the big thing about anxiety is it is truly a psychological disorder where it can start to manifest itself in different ways, obsessive compulsive behavior, panic attacks, and that kind of thing. So anxiety, it might look and feel like stress in the way it manifests in the body, but psychologically it is a different process. Now, I did put up here 2 examples, and the examples that I used date back to my time in public accounting. So stress, it's March, at the end of March, I have a lot of clients that haven't submitted their information, and I've been reaching out and it's not working. So as the days tick by, I'm feeling more and more pressure and escalating strain as I get closer to April 15th. That can lead to stress. Now, anxiety on the other hand. Let's say I made a mistake on the return last year, and when it went up the chain and got reviewed, it wasn't caught. And now I'm starting to worry and get a little nervous. Maybe the client might be perceiving me as less competent, or maybe I'm worrying about anything that I'm doing being caught on review again. And so it's almost like I'm pre-worrying about something that may never happen. That's what might be causing an increased feeling of anxiety. So that there is the difference. And you can see that anxiety can create this feeling of stress. It creates this strain, but it is caused different. It's general in this example. It's nothing that actually, but it's something I'm perceiving. All right, now when I say it feels similar, we can look at what it feels like being anxious versus what it feels like stressed. And what's important here is they're very similar, but as I've mentioned, the underlying causes and then the things that are activating might be different. So, for example, like stress, anxiety can cause symptoms like racing heartbeat, rapid breathing, and tension. One of the differences, though, is that anxiety, between stress and anxiety, is the presence of that specific activator, because you can experience anxiety in the absence of a stressor. And you can experience it long after any perceived threat or difficult situation has passed. And that stress typically passes or it eases after the event is over. And as I mentioned before, that anxiety can actually build up and lead to other ongoing problems, like that panic attack. I know for me, I think last year it was, I can attest to this, because I experienced something that was so intense that it was the first time I think I classified a reaction to this feeling of a general anxiety or stress as a panic attack. And what made it different for me is, I'm in my office and I'm minding my own business, so to speak. And then all of a sudden, I started feeling this pressure in my chest. I started feeling this overwhelming urge to cry, and I generally don't cry. I couldn't even tell you why I was crying. There was this physical sensation in my hands, and I kept trying to shake it off. It got so bad that I had to leave the house. Got in the car, I had to drive around. I ended up taking my dog for a walk around the local park. It was a very strange, what I think of as a panic attack, something I hadn't experienced before or since. And as I look back, it really was because of stress that accumulated to the point that it activated the fear. So I'm curious. Let's go to the next polling question. Which do you experience the most? So if you think about the way I'm describing both of these things and looking back at very stressful periods or difficult periods or uncertainty, do you think you'd classify it as stress versus anxiety or a combination of both? For me, I would call it stress most of the time and anxiety some of the time.
All right, that poll number 2 is up and running. We'll give it about another 30 seconds here.
Great, thank you. I'm thinking about being locked in my room during COVID and just feeling like I just can't leave.
All right, I'll let you know that the majority so far with 44% have said both, 27% stress, 19% anxiety, 6% not sure, 4% prefer not to answer. Back to you. Did I lose you? Oh, I can't hear you, Jana. Can you hear me? I think I might have lost you. If you can hear me.
Can you hear me?
Oh, there you are. Yes, great.
All right, I'm going to try getting my headphone again. Am I back?
Yes.
Yay. Thank you, everyone, for being patient. We don't usually have me dialing in solely by phone, so I just appreciate everybody hanging in there. All right, levels of stress. Let's talk about levels. If I'm going to go back to this busy season scenario, first let's talk about that stress is normal, and some of our stress is actually healthy stress. If you've ever been excited, you've got some really great news, That adrenaline that you're feeling in your body and your heart racing, those are the same responses to stress. And stress isn't all bad. Good stress is tax season, let's go, I'm ready. Healthy stress would be, it's busy, but sure, I got this. Fatigue would be, all right, I'm worrying that maybe it might become a little bit unmanageable, but I'm hanging in there. Exhaustion is, I'm taking it day by day, kind of like a long, slogging endurance run. You're just hanging in there. And then anxiety, I'm generally concerned if I'm going to get everything done. And I will tell you, I hit all of these at some point. Busy season is actually like a stress roller coaster. You can go in and out of these levels over the course of just a few months. Transitioning back and forth can lead to emotional exhaustion. It can activate some of that anxiety. And then what's more important is it can be difficult to transition back to normal after busy season. Now, when you look at it in terms of types and you categorize it that way, acute stress, this is part of that normal stress. We see it all the time. It's the kind most of us are familiar with, and we bounce back pretty quickly. Now, when you start to see it recurring over and over again, it can give this sense of that things are hectic or things are chaotic. And if you do this a lot and you have frequent episodes of acute, or I should say normal stress, our bodies don't do well handling this, and it starts to affect you physically, and it starts to impact your mental well-being. And then you get to chronic stress, which it's just sustained. And when you have sustained stress over long periods of time, it can lead to more serious health issues. Think of things like chronic pain or another chronic illness where it can be debilitating. And I think in those cases, it feels more clear. If I have MS, muscular sclerosis, I understand how it can come and go in terms of different levels of intensity. But I don't necessarily see mental health challenges and stress affecting me in the same way. Well, I'm here to tell you, it can affect you the same way. Let's look at the signs. I think if you look at the signs, it can start to feel really clear what I mean by this emotional roller coaster. Because if you look at these four groupings, body, behavior, psychological, and mood, all of these things can come and go briefly. All of them can start to show up together, and a lot of them can start to just become chronic. And as a result, there are physical consequences to these things. They can affect our decision-making abilities. They can affect our concentration. It can actually impact our memory, or we can start to distort some of the things we see. So, physical things are like headaches, insomnia. You can have a rash. Behavioral symptoms might be eating differently, crying more often than usual. Crying can be a stress relief mechanism, actually. Social withdrawal. I could experience anxiety. We talked about our nervousness. Or from an emotional perspective, I can start to feel sad or angry, or I start to lose confidence. So these are important things to notice. I have these up here on the screen because any of these words could be indicators to you that you are feeling stressed. And I mentioned before, for me, it was just, there's this low level of stress so often and so pervasive that I wouldn't have said I was under stress until you start looking at the combinations of signs here. Now, stress in the workplace, it's almost ubiquitous. But here's the thing. We are seeing chronic levels of stress across society today.
Jana, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, your volume has gotten very quiet. Are you able to speak up just a little bit? I'm not sure why it's gotten quiet.
I'm going to give up on the headphones and just hold my phone. How's that?
Oh, that sounds good. Thank you so much.
Yes. Now let's just hope if I lean on the phone, I don't accidentally hang up. Has anybody ever done that? You're leaning on the phone and then...
Yes.
Oh, it's been a day. It's been a stressful day. And I've actually practiced some of the techniques I'm going to walk you through in a moment. But let's just talk about stress generally, because we are experiencing chronic levels. The Surgeon General issued a report, I want to say October of last year. And in that report, the goal was to raise these alarms about this looming public health crisis around loneliness, isolation, and a lack of connection. And I share that because 40% of employees report feeling a sense of loneliness in the workplace. And there is this relationship between loneliness and stress. And when you start looking at some of these statistics, there was a Mindshare Partners report in 2021 called the Mental Health Report. They found that 68% of millennials and 81% of Gen Zers have resigned from their jobs for mental health reasons. 91% believe their company culture doesn't support mental health, but should. And here's the thing, millennials are the largest generation in the workforce today. So when you think about that and then start to look across some of these statistics, it can be troubling. Add to that 49% of the respondents in that study, they describe, only 49% would describe their experience of talking about this at work as a positive experience. And so that really underscores the importance of addressing mental health and wellness in the workplace, because behind this is real money. U.S. businesses lose up to $300 billion a year, and pervasiveness that 91% believe the company culture should support mental health. So it is something that we can't avoid and something we need to pay more attention to. Part of the way we can do that is to notice what it is that is causing stress in the workplace. Now, here's the thing. Chat is not enabled on these platforms, but let me tell you, folks, if I asked you all to drop in another example of a stressor in the workplace, I have a couple of them listed here, I would say we'd crash the webinar platform because there'd be so many different types of stressors. You know, we all experience different things differently. So something that might be a stressor for me, you might roll off of your back. Is that the right? Roll off your shoulders, roll off your back. But what's important here is noticing what your stressors are. Is it poor communication? Is it working too long? Is it having too much on your plate at any given time? Does it feel like you don't have any resources to do your work? There's this idea of agency. And agency refers to having this feeling of control over your actions and then their consequences. And when you feel like you have a sense of agency, it can create stability. You might not feel a sense of agency depending on what stressors are activating you. There's a Dr. Carl Albrecht, I believe that's how you say his name. He's a recognized expert on cognitive styles and the development of advanced thinking skills. And he organized some of these differently. And so you can look at these stressors in 4 different kinds of groups. One might be time stress. So this is fixating on deadlines or volumes of work. So that could be up here on the list, long work hours or increasing workload. Anticipatory stress is worrying, fixating on a potential outcome. And maybe that's around lack of support or you don't feel you have resources. Situational stress is around situations that are beyond your control. So that might be your poor manager, that your manager is micromanaging you. There's nothing you can do there. And then encounter stress is worrying about interacting with a person or a group. Maybe that's because there's poor communication. So understanding what is causing the stressors, the nature of the stressors, and the impact of those stressors on you. When we start looking at the techniques and strategies, you might want to pull out a handful of them because you might need to try different techniques. You might find that different techniques help you depending on the type of activator that is causing your stress or the persistence of that stress. Happens for a day or two, happens for a week, or now you're noticing it is never really abating. This is why mental health and wellness in the workplace is so important. Let's go ahead and open that next poll about the journey. Autumn, let's have that open just for a moment. And while it's open, I want to talk about this slide, mental health and wellness at work. Now, I put this definition up here. Workplace wellness refers to the practice of implementing policies, programs, and initiatives aimed at improving health and well-being of employees in a work environment. It includes physical, mental health, mental health, emotional well-being, and work-life balance. Why is this important? Because the data tells us everything you see here pointing up, that's a boost. Boost in performance, confidence, belonging, stamina, resilience. And the ones that are pointing down, that's what's going to happen if we don't pay attention to this, which is absenteeism and isolation. If we boost mental health, we reduce absenteeism. So this is really important. And it could be as simple as that, asking somebody, how are you doing? Or being somebody that your colleague can come to when they just need to talk something through because they're experiencing a difficult situation. So in terms of workplace wellness, what does this actually look like? Well, it's holistic. As I mentioned before, it covers all areas, physical, mental, and emotional. And when you look at what the workplace is doing, the goals are to enjoy all of those boosts or avoid all of those negatives like absenteeism, etc. And not only does it boost productivity because we're healthier, we take fewer sick days, but this positive culture I was talking about earlier in my work, creating these brave spaces where I get to show up safely, where it's okay for me to say I'm not okay. That is a big reason why workplace wellness is important today. So now when you look at enhancing employee well-being, it really does fall into three different areas. So the essential elements here are things like the benefits, health insurance, mental health days, flexibility, or educational programs like stress management seminars. It could be fitness apps, ergonomic tools like chairs, etc. When you look at focus areas, it could be around managing and reducing stress like a mindfulness training or a relaxation space, a yoga space. It could be on-site gyms. It could be mental wellness days. And then under the key components, you have a couple of different things. Like these are the actual programs you might want to think about doing, or different practices like a walk and talk meeting might be a physical fitness initiative. Working from home, how about this? No overtime policy. All right, that's probably not going to work in accounting, but it could be outside of our busy cycles. You don't check your email at night and on the weekends. And we say it and we stand by it. So that's going to be its own challenge. But employee well-being really does require us to think holistically, which I think these examples show.
Jana, would you like the results from that poll?
Oh, no, we can keep going because that's just a general poll.
Oh, okay.
I will say, and I should have asked you this at the beginning, if you see any big questions coming in, please interrupt and let me know what they are throughout. But I will say to folks, I'll also get a report of the Q&A. And so I'll try to follow up on email if I see some, as much as I can, or you'll have my contact information. You're welcome to email me after because I know there's been some technical challenges today. All right, self-care fundamentals. I feel like I don't even need to go through this slide, but I'm going to say it anyway. Eat. I am notoriously bad at skipping lunch. So what do I do today? I set an alarm. It goes off at 1 o'clock every day. I've been making smoothies because it's quick and it's healthy. Or here's one, I make my lunch in advance, almost like a lunchbox. and it's helpful because I run downstairs, I pop it in the microwave, and then I come back up. Even if I'm eating at my desk, I'm having food. And sleep. And can I just talk about the 8 hours of sleep thing? I'm a 6-hour sleeper. What you need to know is what's right for you. And if you set a fixed time to go to bed, not only can it help you fall asleep faster, but it might help you when you're sleeping fewer hours that you can fall asleep fairly easily. And so the sleep you get is better quality. You also want to know the minimum amount of sleep you need to be functional. I know for me, I need at least 2 hours or I'm no good the next day. It's also important to notice that you don't have too many consecutive days of minimum sleep. And then exercise. Just move. 10 minutes a day, 10 minutes, 3 times a day. It's doable. And you're going to see here in a moment for some of these strategies, you literally could just stand and stretch or do some body weight type exercises. And that's enough. It really is enough. Now, a couple other things I want to talk about before I list these strategies. One here is compassion. I include this slide because it's often a piece that's missing in the conversation. Oh, I know there have been some interesting headlines about this, but I'm going to use it anyway. Think about oxygen masks on a plane. You can't help somebody else if you aren't in a good place. Your work will not be as good. Your productivity will decline. The level of engagement and helpfulness and support for other people and that you allow other people to offer you will decline. If you are not in a good place, you will start to suffer those different side effects that we were talking about under signs of stress, and you can manage them. But it starts with your mindset, because self-care isn't just about behavior or the things we do. It's about mindset. It impacts our self-talk, which can be negative. It influences our attitude towards others. A lot of times when we think about self-care, we think of them as action items, which, to be fair, I do have some techniques here that I'm going to share in a moment, but you have to want to take care of your body. You have to acknowledge your needs. It is not selfish for you to want to take some time to restore your energy. So I just wanted to share this because, as I mentioned, it's not always part of the conversation, and it can be difficult to show some self-compassion in today's world. That doesn't seem for some like something we should be paying attention to. Now, intention setting. That's another thing that doesn't always get included. An intention is something you plan to do. If you mean it, it's an intention. And this is important because this is the motivation behind what we do. And this isn't the same as a goal, which is focused on the outcome. This is really the focused on the plan. Now, how you go about executing the plan, that's a little bit different, but that you want to have a plan, that you see clarity, that you have a purpose. This is what helps you get through these really difficult and stressful times. And so understanding what your intentions are can help you stay focused. It can also help you understand and identify those activators that are causing stress. Now, when we look at strategies for managing stress, I really wanted to organize it into these 4 buckets, because I think when it comes to managing stress, organizing them this way can help you identify what strategy might work. So the first one is, you know it's coming. Think, I know tax season is coming, right? 2, you're in the thick of it right now. It's during a stressful period. So let's pick March 14th. You're in the thick of it. The third one is recovering from stress. Let's say that's April 16th, or I guess depending on the holiday, April 17th or April 18th. And then number 4, during an unexpected event, let's call that an IRS tax notice. Let's assume it's a bad notice because sometimes they're just, routine. But they do create a moment of stress, and stress doesn't have to be long. It just does trigger or activate these these responses in our body. So how does understanding where we are in these 4 groupings help? Well, in anticipation of a stressful period or a stressful event, you can do some planning, like break it down into manageable tasks, create a prioritization, set realistic deadlines. You can identify friends or family members or colleagues who you can go to if you need support, assurance, or you just need to sort of dump out your ideas and get them off your chest. The other one thing you can do here is what's called mental rehearsal. So here's where you visualize that stressful period, and then you think through how you want to handle it, how you want to show up. During the stressful period, you can take mindful breaks or stay connected using that support system. Stay grounded, if you will. Focus on what you can control. When you're recovering, this is an opportunity to reflect, to recharge and prioritize your rest, and engage in hobbies. completely check out or step away. And if it's unexpected, the first thing I'm going to suggest is pause and take a breath. Try to step back and look at the situation objectively. Then you want to very quickly prioritize. And once you do that, you then fall into the 1, 2, or 3 buckets here following those same strategies. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you don't notice what's going on. And so if you hear nothing else today, please hear this. You can't help what you can't see. And that's why I have to start with notice. That's all you see here, because we have to notice what's going on in order to address it. Now, I've created this framework, the REM 360 framework, to really help us connect to facilitate this connection to our emotions and then how they impact us so we can recover from it. It's a cycle and it's at all levels. And let me go through these definitions really quickly, because this will help us look at the impact of these tools and strategies. So the first one is real-time awareness. And if I bottom line this, it's noticing what's happening in the moment and that you're having a reaction to it. And the reason you want to do this is so you can be deliberate in how you show up. The next one's emotional anchoring. This is about maintaining composure, protecting your mind and your heart and your energy despite this trigger or this difficult situation. And then mindful recovery is recharging those batteries, so to speak, after it has happened with self-compassion and grace. Now, so for real-time awareness, what we want to do is connect the mind and the body. And the idea here is that attitudes, thoughts, and feelings influence our physical and our mental health. So there are 4 steps involved. First, what are you thinking about right now? Next, what emotions am I feeling? Next, how are these emotions affecting me physically? And then the last one is, how is this internal state that I'm now identifying affecting my behavior? So what are you looking for? Well, internally, there's some reactivity that you can start to pay attention to. Rapid heartbeat, clenching your jaw, hunching, tight shoulders, your energy is zapped out. These are some things that you might be able to notice that you are having some kind of a reaction. I really like this chart that shows all the little bodies and where emotions show up. There's been some science behind scanning our bodies to see. And I think I only share this because sometimes it's difficult to place an emotion. You can say something like, I have a gut feeling, or I know this, I'm feeling a certain way, but you can't put words to it. Starting to notice how it shows up in your body can really help us develop that real-time awareness. And then the last one is emotional anchoring. What this is about is it's giving you a place to come to where you can get grounded, which is really getting rid of all the excess energy and becoming mindful of your environment. Grounding is generally when we want to slow down our emotions and get in touch with our internal state so we can be present and engaged. Centering, on the other hand, is about getting back to this sense of equilibrium. We generally use it when you want to check in with what's going on so you can get back to feeling like yourself. They both allow you to stay connected with your intention. Now, what's behind this? We have mindfulness, which is this general awareness. Simply put, it's noticing what's happening in our minds and our bodies. It's been used to help in therapy to lower stress, reduce harmful thinking patterns, reduce anxiety. It can reduce depression. So mindfulness really is a powerful tool. And there are 3 purposes here. The first one is that what I mentioned, notice what's happening. When we notice, we can interrupt that unconscious behavior and really make it intentional. It doesn't mean we're going to do what we say we're going to do, but it gives us a chance to try. Now, so let's jump into some of these techniques I was talking about. Here, from a mindfulness perspective, there are a lot of different breathing techniques you can use. For example, one might be box breathing. And the way box breathing works is you first consciously relax your shoulders, soften your jaw. You might want to look down or even close your eyes. And then to the count of 4, you inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. You hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4. You exhale slowly. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you hold that. 1, 2, 3, 4. And what that does is it slows down your breathing cycle. And folks, let me tell you, I was doing this one today. The other one I was doing was just deep breathing, which is inhaling and filling your lungs and slowly exhaling. And actually audibly exhaling, like, whew. I don't know if that came through on the phone, but you get the idea. So any of these breathing exercises can be important, and you can look them up. There are instructions, there are apps online, etc. Meditation is a practice that you can go through to train your attention, and this can really help curb reactivity. So meditation is something that you can find through apps. There's a Netflix, I don't know if it's still there, but there was a show on Netflix about through Headspace on meditating. So it's even on television these days. Then the third phase is mindful recovery. And this is about finding that way to get back to that balance and recovery. The first question, this is the next polling question, do you have a mindfulness practice?
All right, let me get that up and running here. There we are. That poll is up for you.
Fantastic. I wanted to ask this question. I'm about to give you a whole bunch of suggestions about different practices you can use, and they fall into a couple of categories like meditation, visualization, breathing, movement. There's also things like time hacks. So as we walk through them, pull out a few and give them a try. Some of them will work and some of them will feel like silly. When you find some that work, practice them. You're going to want to know how to do it so that when you need it, it's there.
All right, I'll let you know that 52% have said no, 42% yes, 7% prefer not to answer.
You know, I should have asked this question a second time, because when we start looking at the list, my guess is some that say no might realize, oh no, I do have a mindfulness practice. I just didn't know it was called a mindfulness practice. So let's look at that slide. Mindfulness is a general term. I actually thought maybe I should change the title of this slide. But anyway, what do we talk about mindfulness? Well, meditations, and those can be really spending some time being centered and reflecting on a particular topic. Like, I want to really just be thoughtful about feeling gratitude or expressing forgiveness to myself. The ones that are centered on a process might be that developing compassion or loving kindness. You have breathing that I talked about, mindful listening, guided imagery. This is using your imagination to visualize peaceful and calming situations. There might be a recording or a script that you sort of facilitate that is facilitating the process. I actually like progressive muscle relaxation. I've used this to fall asleep, but it's a form of mindfulness because what it's doing is drawing your attention to your body, and you do that by tensing and then relaxing different muscle groups. And if you were curious to try this, what I would suggest is laying down and then starting with your toes, tense them up, and then so curl up your toes, then release them. Tense your ankle to try to lock your foot in place and then release it. Then you do your calf and then your hamstring and so on, all the way up to, squinching your eyes and letting it go. And it really does bring a sense of calm, and shockingly or not shockingly, it's drawn you away from whatever's going on in the moment. You can do this sitting at your desk. Nobody needs to know that you're scrunching up your toes underneath the table or underneath your desk. And it's, one of the things you can do is put your hands flat on the table and then press down where you can feel your arms and the muscles in your arms flexing, possibly even your shoulders. Nobody knows you're doing it, and it might give you the 2 or 3 minutes you need to reset. Mindful breathing is easy to do, just taking some of those deep breaths. If you've ever found yourself stressed and you just go, and you do that a couple times, you have been practicing mindfulness, and didn't even know it. Now let's talk about moving. Movement practices are things that you get up out of your chair and do something. Yoga, this is considered a practice, and this is really about going mindfully through specific moments, focusing on your breath and your bodily sensations as you go through these poses. Mindful walking could be just going for a walk, no phone, no podcast, no headset with music. You're walking deliberately and you're paying attention to what you feel like hitting the ground, how you're breathing. You're listening to the environment around you, birds, nature, your feet falling on the ground, the cars and the traffic. Just do that for 5 minutes, and you'll find that it really what we're trying to do here is bring you back to a sense of balance. Or put some music on and dance. This actually helps connect the body and the mind. Now, I put a slide up here on yoga because I think yoga has a bad rep, but it's one of those things that can be done anywhere. It doesn't require any level of physical ability. It's open, it's available to everybody, all ages. You can sit, you can stand, you can do it for just 5 minutes. There are classes online. It started as a spiritual practice, but now it's really about promoting physical and mental well-being. And it's really about knowing what the poses are and then holding them. Now, if you've downloaded the handout, and I hope you have, I have included a number of resources that you can look for how to understanding just the benefits of mental health and wellness at work. There are tools and resources and sites and apps that can help you with all of this stuff. So, for example, I use the Calm app. They have meditation in there. They actually have a meditation that they can walk you through. I do listen to this to do my mindful walking. Let me think. I'm a Peloton user. If you're on Peloton, I'm fearlessly me on the leaderboard. Toss out a high five if I see you, if you see me. They actually have yoga classes, and I've done them. Before boarding a flight, I have done a 10-minute standing yoga, which is essentially going through this series of stretches to relax my body, get the blood flowing before I sit on a plane for a few hours. But there are a lot of places you can do this. And then in this last slide under other practices, I just started to list a bunch of things you can do. Journaling helps you reflect back. This could be at the end of a day. This could be after part of your recovery and bounce back. So at the end of tax season, reflecting on how tax season went. Maybe you've been journaling throughout, and now you can go back and look at them. Mindful eating. Interestingly enough, this is about, in this moment, noticing the textures and the flavors of the food as you eat them and activating all of those senses. You can do other things like, let me think, what are some of the things that I do? I used to do, my husband and I did these things, we called them stop sign dates. And what we would do is we would get up in the middle of the day, walk together down to the stop sign without cell phones, without the dog, and walk back. It seems silly, but I will tell you that it really does a wonderful thing to shake off the stress even for a moment, because that's what we're talking about doing. Well, before we wrap this thing up, I left a few minutes here. Are there any questions that are coming in, Autumn?
We have a lot of great comments coming in. Would you like me to read some of those?
Please.
All right, let me go to that. I got to find them all here. We had so many. Let's see. My DBT therapy had alternate nostril breathing as our mindfulness exercise this week. This is a good review of that training. Thanks.
I'm going to have to try to figure that one out.
Yeah. Someone was just mentioning, this is previously when you're talking about symptoms, that tension headaches are often one of the symptoms with stress and anxiety. And another comment here, a wife suffers from PTSD. She worries about things before they ever happen and plans for how she is going to react to any negative event that might happen.
I'm actually grateful for that comment, because PTSD is something that's often overlooked, and people think of it as being the result of a really big trauma, and that is true. It can also be the result of chronic stress, of an event that activated stress that became acute, chronic, and ultimately is leading to challenges. So thank you for raising awareness on that.
Question here for you. What are some green flags when looking for a job with good mental health culture?
Ask. It's interesting, but if you ask an organization, how important is mental wellness? What are your mental health and wellness practices look like? You can't exactly bluff your way through that. So if you go back to the slide that I have on, let me scroll back up here. It's the one titled Enhancing Employee Well-Being, and you look at the different elements, focus areas, and components. Listen for the cues and clues that they have, either programs or benefits or resources or awareness around these different areas.
All right, we just have a lot of great comments coming in saying they appreciate the ideas and how motivating it is. Another person was saying their music and dancing is a great outlet for me. I agree with that personally. That's how I like to do that too as well. Yeah, so just a lot of great comments coming in with that.
Well, how about we open that last poll?
Okay.
And while that last poll is open, I just want to thank everybody for joining me. It's really about putting yourself first. It's okay to take those minutes and those moments. We all know the feeling of when you get to overwhelm, you sometimes can get to the point where you can't do anything. And the goal here, I called it Keep It Together today. This is the name of the program, is because that's what we want to do. We don't want to fall apart. And when you know the stress is coming, I want to almost say shame on you. Well, let me put it on me. Shame on me for letting it get this far without having tried to do something. It can catch you by surprise. That is fair. But if you can see it coming because it's a routine, or you know that you have a natural tendency to react to something, put a plan in place, find a couple of techniques or strategies that work for you, try some of the resources that I've included. And what I hope for you is that you get to make it through the stressful period. I won't say unscathed, and I don't know if this is a word, but maybe it's less scathed. Well, I've enjoyed being with you today. I appreciate you being patient with the audio and with the technology and for not being able to join you on camera like I usually do. I'm wishing you all much success and balance and calm as you go through your next period of stress.